Imagine your home bombed, your family scattered, your nation's economy crippled, and when you ask for justice, the answer you get is not just no, it's laughter. That's the story we're talking about today. Iran's demand for reparations did not emerge in a vacuum. It is rooted in decades of tension, intervention, and conflict that have shaped the nation's political and economic trajectory. From Iran's perspective, the list of grievances is long and costly. The 1953 coup that toppled a democratically elected government and installed a Western-friendly monarchy, years of sanctions that crippled the economy and restricted access to global markets, and military confrontations that resulted in civilian casualties. Each event, in their view, represents not just a moment in history, but a direct assault on their sovereignty and prosperity. The call for reparations is therefore framed as a moral and historical claim, not merely a financial one, seeking acknowledgement for what they see as deliberate actions that inflicted lasting damage on their nation's stability, infrastructure, and international standing. When Iran formally raised the issue of reparations, the reaction from many American officials and media outlets was not measured negotiation, but open dismissal, often wrapped in humor. Press conferences brushed aside the demand with sarcastic quips. Late-night talk shows turned it into comedic fodder, and political commentators framed it as an absurd overreach rather than a legitimate grievance. This approach turned the exchange from a diplomatic matter into a spectacle for domestic audiences, reinforcing a narrative that Iran's claim was laughable rather than discussable. While the mockery resonated with segments of the American public who view Iran as an adversary, it also sent a clear message abroad. The grievances of certain nations are not taken seriously when they challenge U.S. actions. This response, instead of closing the chapter, deepened mistrust and painted the U.S. as unwilling to engage in even symbolic acknowledgement of harm. The friction between the United States and Iran is anchored in a history that spans more than 7 decades, marked by interventions, conflicts, and mutual distrust. It began most prominently in 1953 when a CIA-backed operation overthrew Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh after he moved to nationalize Iran's oil industry, reinstating the Shah and entrenching a pro-Western monarchy. This set the tone for years of political manipulation and economic entanglement. The 1979 Islamic Revolution and subsequent U.S. embassy hostage crisis further deepened animosity, cementing Iran's image in Washington as a hostile state. The Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s added another layer, with the U.S. offering support to Saddam Hussein's forces, including intelligence and military aid, despite Iraq's use of chemical weapons. Tensions escalated further in 1988 when the USS Vincennes shot down Iran Air Flight 655, killing 290 civilians, an incident the U.S. framed as a mistake but never formally apologized for. Years of crippling sanctions followed, aimed at curbing Iran's nuclear ambitions but also devastating its economy. From Iran's perspective, this long chain of events forms a continuous thread of injury, interference, and injustice that strengthens their argument for reparations. When a nation responds to a serious grievance with mockery rather than measured dialogue, it does more than just reject the claim. It dismisses the legitimacy of the other party entirely. In diplomacy, tone is as consequential as substance. Ridicule signals that the issue is not worth dignifying with debate. For a smaller or less powerful country, this can feel like an assertion of dominance, reinforcing the idea that might determines whose pain matters. Such behavior erodes trust, not only between the two nations involved, but also in the eyes of the international community, which watches how powerful states treat those with less leverage. Mockery replaces the possibility of compromise with the certainty of resentment, leaving no room for even symbolic gestures of acknowledgement or reconciliation. Over time, this approach hardens positions, fuels nationalist rhetoric, and makes future negotiations more difficult as the slight lingers long after the laughter fades. The clash between Iran's demand and America's mockery carries implications that go far beyond the borders of the two countries. In the international arena, the way a powerful nation responds to claims from a smaller or weaker state sets an example. either for respectful engagement or for dismissive dominance. If the precedent becomes one where grievances from less influential nations are met with derision, it risks normalizing a global order in which justice is secondary to power, and historical wrongs are simply ignored when inconvenient. This dynamic can embolden other powerful states to act with similar disregard, creating a cycle where smaller nations feel they have no peaceful avenue to seek redress, increasing the likelihood of hostility, alliances of resistance, or escalation in a conflict. It also undermines international institutions designed to mediate such disputes, as they appear ineffective when the most powerful players can simply laugh off their responsibilities without consequence. In this way, the handling of this single dispute feeds into a broader question of whether global governance is truly about fairness or merely about the ability to dictate the narrative. Asterisk. In the end, this is not just about one claim or one response. It's about the values we choose to uphold when history knocks at our door. Reparations may never be paid, agreements may never be reached, but the choice between dignity and derision is always ours to make. Because when nations replace listening with laughter, they trade the possibility of peace for the certainty of bitterness. And that is a debt the world can never afford to leave unpaid. Asterisk.